People today could spend half their lives over 50. That's a lot of living. So it helps to have someone in your corner right here in your community. That someone is AARP. AARP is here to help you stay active, healthy, and informed. AARP District of Columbia, in collaboration with Georgetown University, released a comprehensive study on health disparities among Black older adults living in the District of Columbia. Visit aarp.org/DC to learn more. JFL and Associates Counseling Services, LLC, knows that sometimes all it takes to change the world is a little support. JFL is dedicated to providing innovative and inclusive care for clients. Since 2000, JFL has provided individuals, families, couples, and group therapy services, dedicated to the mission of providing outstanding counseling services. They believe that mental health is a fundamental right. Visit jflcounseling.org for additional information.
Curated by Dr. Orlando Jermaine Bego, Keep the Faith Project for African American Men, Identity, Truth, and Healing is a platform that looks at the intersectional lens that influences physical, psychological, spiritual, and emotional well-being. Whether it is a text post, a piece of art, a video, or a discussion, telling your story is the starting point of experiencing wholeness. Tag Keep Faith Project at the Keep the Faith Project so we can share your story too.
Well, welcome to the Black Men's Health Series as we seek to explore the intersectionality between mental health and African American men. I am Dr. Orlando Jermaine Bego, curator of the Keep the Faith Project. The Keep the Faith Project for African American Men, Identity, Truth, and Healing. It's a platform that addresses the health issues of African American men through the cultural nature of narrative. Simply put, we allow you to share your story. The primary focus comprises of three essential aspects of personhood: the biological, the physiological, the social, and as well as the spiritual. Our objective is simple: to normalize the discourse of mental health of Black men. This three-part discussion has focused on racism, religion, and tonight on sexuality. Research and theoretical suppositions suggest that the Black man has more depressive symptoms and anxiety than their Black female counterparts, white men and white women, and that anxiety level increases when it relates to human sexuality. Tonight's discussion: sexuality and its impact on the Black man, the relationship between depression, anxiety, and their sexual identity. Here's a couple of quick instructions for you on tonight. Make sure that you like, share, and comment on tonight's conversation. Put your questions in the chat on Facebook and as well as IG, and we'll be monitoring the chat rooms to make sure that your questions are answered by our panelists. We ask that you will also use the hashtag Keep the Faith. That's right, hashtag Keep the Faith on everything that you post on social media pertaining to this discussion. Before we continue, I would like to thank our sponsors for the discussion. AARP District of Columbia, who has released a study in conjunction with the University of Georgetown University, on the social determinants of health as it relates to older adult African American and Blacks living in Washington, D.C., and FJL Counseling Services right here in Washington, D.C., that provide both individual, family, and group therapy sessions to meet your needs. Now let's get right to it as we introduce our distinguished panelists for tonight. R.C. Osborne-Williams has earned a degree in both psychology and special learning disabilities from Bethune-Cookman University, as well as a master's degree in education at Temple University and a master's degree in family therapy at Nova Southeastern University. He also studied human sexuality at Widener University, there where he utilizes a client-centered and strength-based approach to counseling and coaching. Welcome, RC Ron Osborne-Williams.
Hey, good night, my brother. How you feeling, Dr.
You're
Lando?
doing well. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Yes.
Next, we have Pastor Jabari A. Douglas, who received his Master's of Art in Religion Studies degree from Howard University School of Divinity, as well as his Master's of Social Work from Howard University School of Social Work with over 18 years of ministry experience. Pastor Douglas established Love Center United Church of Christ, creating a cutting-edge ministry that reaches people in marginalized community, reconciling sexuality and spirituality. Welcome to tonight's discussion, Pastor Jabari.
It's good to be here, my brother. Good to be here.
Last and certainly not least, we have Reverend Terence Mayo, who is a scholar activist, passionate about the work of equity, justice, human and community development. His research interests include intersectionality, Black Atlantic religion and cultures, identity formation, social change, social psychology, post-colonialism, social and economic inequality, and making it make sense. Welcome, Reverend Terence.
Good evening. Good evening. Thanks so much for having me.
Gentlemen, tonight's discussion will cover human sexuality. And I think because this is such an enormous mountain of topic and discussion, we want to jump right into it. While the behaviors of Black males are widely studied and often pathologized, they're internal. Their subjective experiences are frequently absent from contemporary research. In essence, there is minimum studies that address the mental health of Black men, let alone in their sexual development. Their lived experiences, for Black males that is somewhat shaped in trauma, whether it's from family dynamics to sexuality to the need of coping strategies within the context of loss, separation, and stress. My opening question is this. The Keep the Faith Project premise for African American men is grounded in the use of narrative, being able to share openly without judgment or consequence. Please provide for our audience tonight your own experience as a Black man and your sexual identity. Let's start with Reverend Jabari.
Okay. As a Black man and my sexual identity. So I identify as sexually fluid. And I came to that realization through years of therapy and deconstructing images and understandings of what was appropriate for me to be and how to identify. But as I guess just to simply answer your question, I currently identify as sexually fluid and ever understanding that my sexuality is on a continuum and has the opportunity to change and to develop as I grow and as I learn myself and learn to accept myself.
Powerful. Ron?
Well, I think that when I think about my sexuality, I probably don't think so much about my sexuality more than I think about my intellectual attractiveness to people or to things. I think because I haven't wanted to be. I found that male sexuality has such a dogma that we are attracted to physical but never mental, and so. And that comes from experience of understanding and experiencing sexuality, sexual abuse at a really early age of finding out where and where you fit in this this in a silo of people identifying what their sexual identity is and who they want to be. I look at things very clear. I think what I'm attracted to, I based on that on who I approach and who I look at and how do I become sexually involved with based on what my attraction is and how I'm attracted to them. So I'm not a big person with labels because I think that labels then tie you into something that then makes you a hypocrite later if you decide that that's not what you want to tomorrow. And I think that, I learned that, when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, you kind of realize that I was one way, but now today I'm another way. So I think that plays a lot about where I view myself. But I'm not so interested in someone even in being even concerned about my sexuality, because I think that I'm more than my sexuality. I want them to recognize who I am first. So I think that's something that's very big to me.
Reverend Terence?
Sure, great question. I identify as a Black, queer, cisgendered man. Black is being the central identifier with the complexities of all of my other intersectional identities kind of going in there. I think my sexuality is drawn from both biological and cultural environments that I was brought up in, raised in, and became a man in. But I am most thankful for my Black queer forefathers and sisters and mothers who challenge stereotypes or Eurocentric ideas of what Blackness and what Black sexuality can be. Such as Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Barbara Williams, and kind of the list goes on and on. And so that's kind of the historical context that brings me into my identity.
Great. Now, and you are going to have to help me as I use the right terminology.
It's all about the intent. It's all about the intent.
So I'm a Black man, heterosexual. So that makes me cisgender.
It doesn't make you cisgender, but
all right. So I need some help because there's so much language, right? As we seek not to be defined by labels, right? In our quest for wholeness, there are so many terminologies to identify with, right? So I'm an African American male, but I'm a heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an appropriate label, if there needed to be one, that would define me?
I think you could bring in. There's definitely multiple things you can bring in, but one that kind of situates us in the current context would be in cisgender. So saying that cisgender, saying you were the gender you were born with is what you identify with. Yes.
Right. So even in the abstract of identifying, right, we have to navigate the vicissitudes of stress, right? There are some who say labels don't matter, while there may be another group who says I've earned the right to this label, right? And so that within itself brings this level of stress, I guess, as it relates to acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair assessment that the labels are tied to a need to feel accepted?
Well, I think part of it is the stress comes when those who are in power have stated what is normal and what is right. And then when your reality differs from the dominant culture, it creates a stress to an extent, because there's a level of not feeling a part and not feeling accepted, and feeling that you are defective in some way or some form. And then it is taught that you are defective. I mean, we thought that in the DSM-5, homosexuality was considered a mental health disorder up until the 80s. And so in order to cure homosexuality, there was all forms of things, shock therapy. But I think on a broader sense, when you talk about human sexuality, because human sexuality, I think we sometimes always go right to homosexuality, but human sexuality is such a large and expansive concept and broad concept that we don't speak to in many times within the Black community at all, in understanding or identifying what it is in regards to our into our maleness or femaleness or non-binariness. And then what does that look like? I think when we talk about sexuality, we always lens to the bedroom, and sexuality is so much more than what you do between the sheets or in the backseat of your car or wherever you decide you enjoy doing it. But we have to look at the dynamics of how then is it socialized to be male, to be Black, one, to be male, and then how do I fit into, I hate fitting because I don't like to fit into this culture anyway, but anyway, to navigate through a world that doesn't accept you or doesn't approve you, and that's where you get the stress. And so Meyer has this whole thing of the minority stress perspective, that those who are marginalized and those who are oppressed have an additional aspect of stress that sits on us because we're trying to navigate in a world that is already aggressive towards our entire being. So I think that it's a very complex question, but I'll.
Yeah. So when we think about research, right? Research always looks at male sexuality from a lens of either cultural variance or sexual orientation or masculinity or relationship discourse or disease prevention, because of the inherent binaries that are associated with these categories. But would you agree that when we begin to look at the emotional instability of Black men, would you contend that the male sexuality is multifaceted, right? That these intersectional identities are more than just these binary categories?
I would, I would have a problem with any research that category Black men, period, because most of the research wasn't the sub-samples wasn't Black men, and if they weren't under their own freedom to be there, so you didn't get the real true person that you could have got for them to represent who it was that they wanted to be. So sometimes we like to say what research denotes is this. The dominance discourse, but that doesn't set for us very well as people who haven't set our own discourse. That's why, people like myself who do a lot of research around black men and Black fathers, my research is saying it's completely different than what research is saying over here, because Black men and fathers are talking to me in a way they wouldn't speak to white researchers, who might most of the time be white females.
Which is a problem in itself, because most of the leading researchers for Black male, whether it's sexuality or identity or whatever the subcategory is not being done by Black males or Black females. Is done not only by white male and females, but also with a Eurocentric lens.
Right. 100%. And so when we want to say, hey, we want to classify what Black men are and how they operate and what their true sexuality is, what anything is, most of what we have is learned behaviors, classic conditioning. I mean, this is not like something that like, oh yeah. And what you see the revolution going on now is people redefining themselves, deconstructing what has someone told them to be, and starting to reconstruct what they want to be. And that's very problematic, because what it also does, it begins to break some of the hold of the oppressor of telling you what you have to be and what you will be. And it's hard because their media is strong. It's strong. It's very hard when you look at the young black hip hop culture today and the things that they do and how they operate and how they have such a strong influence on 13, and then we go to 10, 11, 7-year-olds. And that's not denoted by me. That's denoted by big music industries who saying this is what we like, this is what we want you to represent, and this is what this culture becomes. And it's a very hard thing to fight. I see it every day trying to fight it in the trenches and saying, look at me, I'm very successful. I don't
Did any of you all see the tweet by Little Nas X?
Which one?
Which one?
I'm like,
It was I saw it right. He talked about how when hip hop or music dealt with misogyny, right, and the exploitation of women and body, it was acceptable. But now I do a song or a concert, I'm on stage, and I'm dealing with my own sexual identity. Now homophobia comes out, and you tell me that I'm destroying some type of fabric, so to say, of a generation, right? And so it's like this hypocrisy that as long as we are objectifying women, then it's okay. But the moment in which I walk into my own truth, I'm deviant.
Yeah, but I think it's not just objectifying women, it's also objectifying men as well, because we, even from the beginning of us coming here, we were viewed as savages and hypersexual. And so black men had to be broken like an animal, like a beast, because we could not be trusted around their white women or around there. And then we've moved from that into, as you talked about, hip hop, where we are the gang bangers, we're the drug dealers, and so there has been an assassination of the black male image since arriving to this country. And so it's more so that the truth of what people think about us, people feel more comfortable about saying it. I mean, they've always felt comfortable saying whatever they want to about us. And so black men have always been fighting for a voice of our own and to name our own selves and also survive as well. So some choices we've made because people are just trying to survive and make a dollar. But I think people now see, there are other opportunities. But when you're fighting against forget hip hop, the news demonizes us on a constant basis, that we are evil and we can't control ourselves and we're violent. Go ahead.
Reverend Terence, you shaking your head like you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you look, I say up front, I'm a Little Nas stan, as my students say. I am all for his Black queer just expressiveness and joy in himself, and finding that passion about who he is. I think he makes a good point. I would critique it a little bit, right? I think there have been moments in hip hop, R&B where there were conscious artists, right, that were really mainstream and really received mainstream. I look at Queen Latifah, a lot of the earlier female rappers her time. I look at even some of the male rappers of that time. But I also realize, right, looking at it in context, that was a specific time frame, right, that was rooted in different things that were going on in the Black culture. And then we came out of that and went to gang banging and, back to misogynistic undertones and exploitation of Black bodies and things like that. So I think for many people, Little Nas X is ushering us back into a theme of thinking about how we show up in all of our intersectional identities. Some are willing to go, some aren't. The baby, these names kill me. Came out with some horrible comments that also Lil Nas X responded to around HIV/AIDS, around male and female sexuality. I mean, so it almost shows this very range of how, you know, one artist sees Black masculinity and very based on power, control, things like that, while another artist really bases it on liberation and freedom, and Black joy, which we don't have enough of. So that's also kind of the conversation that's kind of going on.
Ron, do you know the artist we talking about?
Oh, you listen. As a college professor, you better know all. As a college professor, you better know all. You got to know all. I was just telling somebody today. They say, "Why you listen to all that? How you know all?" I know Julio. I know all. I know all of.
Listen,
all of the backstories.
I'm over here trying to read your body language, and
because I'm listening and I'm thinking, you know, it's a very interesting dynamic that we even can talk about. Those two sitting on two different polars of masculinity, and the reason why, and let me tell you what I really feel that is the reason why the baby has an issue with it is because it's about green. Because clearly Nas X is able to now get a larger audience than the baby's going to be able to get, and he's saying, well, what can I do to offset his power? And so it's not about their masculinity; it's about their, you know, their finance. Well, who's going to make the most money? And it's like what I call the hating. It's hating on someone getting what you think you should get, but you're not going to get that population because you're I would say in many senses the ideal toxic masculine rapper. I mean, everything has naked women. They suck this. They do that. You slap them down, you'll kill this person. These things are very strong, and that feeds into a lot of toxic masculinity for men and people who feel like they're bravado and this and that. Total different end, and I have to say that I hate to say it. I don't hate to say it, but I've watched Nas X and I say, yo, he's running the game right now. I hate to if you remove the idea if you have an issue with someone's sexuality, he's running the game better than the counterparts. And the counterparts are not us, but our counterparts.
Right.
He's running the game, and it's scary that he can run the game at that level. And he's doing something.
Here's the question: Who is defining Black masculinity?
I don't think anybody.
How is there a universal? And here it is the second part to it. Let me say this then. Is Black masculinity the same as Black manhood?
No.
I think, you know, just to jump on in there. So I think at one time in our history, I think when the Black church had a level of power and authority, they tried to define Black masculinity and Black manhood as to what a man is and what a man should do. As when the Black church was the center of the community.
That's a whole nother subject.
That's a whole nother dynamic. But that also shaped how men appeared and expressed themselves and showed themselves, and there was a level of patriarchy and all this anyway. But in our current context now, as Brother Ron has stated, I mean, I don't think anybody's trying to define Black masculinity. I think from my perspective, people are trying to silence Black men on any level that they can, if not kill and assassinate, at least silence or control to some extent. But no one really cares about the development of the Black man. And what does that, and the development of the Black man. I mean, when you get to, we have Dr. Joanza Kutufu who talks about, you know, the third grade syndrome. Once we hit third grade, they see how many Black males are in the third grade and develop prisons. And so,
absolutely.
So if you talk about development, it's not development, it's imprisonment, it's slavery. It's how can we reincarcerate or enslave you once again from my lens.
But we have a definition for hypermasculinity. Right, we got a definition for hypersexuality, right? So should there be some basis, Reverend Terence, for how we identify, define, or understand Black masculinity?
I mean, I think for me, it depends on whose perspective are you looking to hear. If you're looking for the academic research type of perspective, I go to academicians that I follow, Dr. Kapana Ratelli out of South Africa, who does amazing work around deconstructing Black masculinity. I look at Dr. Naeem Akbar, clinical psychologist, who's also done a lot of work around Black masculinity, identity formation, Black male health, and also Dr. Lee Butler, another academician, pastoral theologian, who has all of these have Afrocentric perspectives, right, which critique the normative, Eurocentric, power-based models of masculinity. And what's important, Eurocentric masculinity. And so part of, for me, the discussion around that is deconstructing and decolonizing how we define ourselves, right? Being very clear on white methods, European scholars, European modalities of thinking and knowing and being do not fit Black people. So we first have to first start there. But I also have to have that kind of in tandem with, for me, Black young people and what they're saying and how they want to show up and identify, and hold that kind of intention with our historical kind of context. Even when you look at identity and how we choose to identify, that has changed over time, whether it be Blackness, African American, Negro American, right? That's just on the race side. We look at sexuality, those shifts have also changed. There were a time, people wanted to be called gay, We don't do that much so anymore, because gay typically goes with whiteness, right? So we use queer, which is much more expansive. But then young people now are saying, we don't even want to be called queer. We just want to be.
So you were helping me, and then you dropped me, right? I said, okay, he going somewhere, gay is out, queer is in. And then you say, well, now the younger generation. So it goes back to Reverend Jabari was talking about in terms of being fluid, but even fluid is on the spectrums, right? It's not just in choice of who I engage in different degrees of intimacy with, but also in terms of, again, we're going back to the labeling, right?
But I think at the end of the day, and we sometimes in the LGBTQIA plus community joke about it, that there's all these letters, but the reality is there is a label for every single letter within the alphabet. And I think the part to respect about that is the fact that I don't think we have to put a pen, or at that much of this stuff is written in pencil, and it's going to change as people grow, as people develop. And when we talk about Black masculinity, and then you talk about Black manhood, and we're talking about human sexuality, you have to realize that some of our lesbian sisters are masculine, as identifying that they are masculine lesbians, but they don't consider themselves a man. And so when we talk about manhood, and even Nas X, who presents as sometimes very feminine, which I think why some people have issues with his presentation and expression. Many people are okay with some people who may be same gender loving and male, as long as they can conceal and they know how to code switch, if you will, to it. But expressing something that may be more feminine. And I think Brother Ron talked about that earlier in regards to just in terms of how we are expressing ourselves and showing ourselves. I think there's an issue with this toxic masculinity, and toxic masculinity is destroying our younger generation and our boys. And so when you talk about what does it mean to be a man and developing men, and we're telling our young boys don't cry because that's weak. When we know that crying is an expression or a biological way of releasing stress and anxiety. But early on, it's like, don't do that. And so you're training us to be non-emotional, which in essence creates a lot of mental health disorders later on in life. And then we don't know how to relate to individuals. So we're trying to fix adults when sometimes we got to go to help try to save the youth.
Here's a question in the chat. How am I supposed to know these things without being offensive? It changes so frequently.
Well, let me tell you how I get to know these things. I go with what the most common thing we have in common is that we black and we facing the same thing. So if you can't identify with that first, then maybe we're not gonna ever get anywhere together.
So stop.
Because I can make a mistake. I can make a mistake and mispronounce you, and I might not recognize of this and that. But I do know that we all have a knee on our neck if we're in this black community. Even if you don't think that you have it on because this is our history of being in this country. And let's build from that. Because that's one of the things I have a problem with. When people say, well, I can't build on the black. Because one thing we all have in common is that we're black. And this not to be separate from anybody else. But we have problems. Most of the things that happen to us is because we're black. So we need to work on understanding and identifying. That's what we need to start working and building from first. And that's a hard thing because I just thought about when you're saying toxic masculinity. All I can think about is toxic masculinity is not something that came from us. That sounds like an oppressor thing. Something oppressors put onto somebody and told you that that's what you became. So a lot of this stuff recycles into, as I would say, supremacy, as we would call it. I'm not going to say whose supremacy, but the supremacy and oppression of people. And mainly that becomes us, and then we take that to somehow try to find and identify who we are away from this idea of blackness. And I think that if we came back to blackness, like Jane Brown said, black is beautiful, black and proud, we would come back to that place, and people would want to be there, and we could develop from there. But a lot of times we're trying to find some place, sometime to fit in that will remove us from that blackness, because blackness is not. A lot of times, as I say, it's not the favorable one,
but it's the plumb line. It should be the standard. Everything shoots off from my black, right?
Well, I think we have to complicate that, right?
Okay.
Because blackness has always been hugely expansive. So we've always been a people that are not monolithic. Right. And so I think one is honoring how blackness shows up. So one thing I always do for students, I ask them when we first meet, how do you choose to identify? And how do you choose for the world to see you and for you to engage in the world? And they will tell you very quickly of what that is for them. But I think many times we get stuck because we become defined by very linear, binary views of what blackness is. And so as long as we understand that blackness is wide and deep, we're good.
I understand exactly what you're saying, because then it becomes who's black, this is black, what's not black. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is a lot of times you see everyone trying to move into these silos. And I think that when we're in our silos, we can't protect each other. And we then align our. A lot of times, what happens? People in a silo and they align themselves with other people outside of blackness. And when I say blackness, I don't mean like what black this and that. I'm saying that your skin looks like. Look, if you're a Latin American in South Florida, where I live at, you are white. If you're white, and if you're not white, they ask you to put on their check off that you're a black Hispanic. That's a key to let you know what this means. I mean, we can feather around it, but that white and black line is very important. And then sometimes when we continue to say it's not, we're doing ourselves a harm by separating ourselves to say, understand, no matter how, I don't care what you do. But if you're a black person, I'm going to help you. I'm going to try to help you as much as possible and do whatever I can to support you. And I'm not going to piggy off of somebody else, even when it might not be in my best interest, because I have found that our counterparts do it all the time if they don't even agree with the person.
See that,
All right,
but
listen, so go ahead, Jabari. You jump in real quick. We right up against the break, but go ahead.
Gotcha. Just really quickly, I guess I have a slight, because when we talk about the silos, sometimes people jump into silos because it's a safe space. And when I think about myself, I'm part of the United Church of Christ, which is lily white denomination, church denomination, but I'm there because Black denominations will not accept me or affirm me in my sexuality. And so we talk about, linking up with Black, but many times those who are on the margins of the sexual spectrum link up with those outside of the Blackness because that's where they are affirmed or can find safety.
And I understand. And listen,
Yeah.
if anybody understands, I definitely understand that because you can clearly say when the pastor in the church tell you, if you are this, get out my church, and this supposed to be a place for God. This is a place for God where we supposed to love, and you telling me if I'm something, I got to get out? No, that don't sound good.
All right, here's a statement. We're right up against it. We're over the break. But here's a statement I came up with.
We don't need a break.
Listen, we gotta pay the bills.
Oh, take the break.
So here's a statement, and that I put together, and I want you all just whether it's true, dissect it, whatever you need to do. All right, here it is. Hypermasculinity is caused by ongoing oppression, creating a hypersensitivity desire that results in hypersexuality that is used as a coping mechanism. Want me to say it again?
Go ahead.
I'm visual, yeah.
Hypermasculinity, which deals with heteronormative dominant culture, is caused by ongoing oppression, example, emasculation, creating a hypersensitivity desire, reformation, that results in hypersexuality, dominance, that is used as a coping mechanism. Yeah, see, I feel good because I got the professors like.
Listen, I'm giving a counterpart because I'm gonna tell you already. I agree. Once you said at the end as a coping technique, every one of those things is a coping technique for the inferiority that we feel as people. So if it's just the inferiority that I as a working class man only make $50,000 to $60,000, and my counterpart who's supposed to be my partner can make $100,000, $150,000. At some point, how do I balance myself out if I haven't been taught or conditioned on how to understand that what I make doesn't make who I am, is what I provide to my family is who I am. And many times you don't have that. So you see that now this person has to demand his partner. He has to run this person and do this to make up for what he don't have. And so sometimes you have to really, you weigh that out. And so I definitely can understand if all of these things at some point being a coping mechanism for what we face on day to day, because everything has a cause and effect. And so if everything was perfect, we would, not have any problems.
All right, real quick, Reverend Terence.
I have to disagree just a bit, critique it just a bit. To end with coping mechanism suggests that is the intended method and intended response. I would say and argue that the intended response is European ideological senses of whiteness and white masculinity. We cope out of the necessity to deal with the harm, but my suggestion is that hypermasculinity does its job by making us conform to the ideas of Eurocentric whiteness.
Dr. Jabari.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the component is hypermasculinity amongst Black men, because the same actions in white America are not seen as hypermasculinity. And so when you can talk about grabbing women's right. I don't know what we can say in show.
You boys say it.
You can say it. You can say it. Hold on. You should be able to say the correct word.
I'm like, I don't know what saying you're throwing now.
That's a biological term. This is very important. Grabbing a vagina, right. That's a biological term. So yes you can.
So grabbing, but that's not considered hypermasculinity. However, within our context, everything is considered hypermasculinity. So I don't know, as even Pastor Mayo has said, if that's a coping mechanism or a tool to feel equal, or to feel valued, or to be on the same playing field as or accepted within the dominant culture. So I think it's how the label is. Everything when it comes to Black is always demonized and always looked at as evil. But when it is in white, it is glorified, and it can be the same exact thing that's happening. It's just when Black hits it, it is horrible, and it needs to be imprisoned, or it needs to be sentenced, or in some vein. So I don't know if it's necessarily coping or just a tool to feel of some value, some way.
All right, this is the Black Health Series by the Keep the Faith Project. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks.
People today could spend half their lives over 50. That's a lot of living. So it helps to have someone in your corner right here in your community. That someone is AARP. AARP is here to help you stay active, healthy, and informed. AARP District of Columbia, in collaboration with Georgetown University, released a comprehensive study on health disparities among Black older adults living in the District of Columbia. Visit aarp.org/DC to learn more. JFL and Associates Counseling Services, LLC, knows that sometimes all it takes to change the world is a little support. JFL is dedicated to providing innovative and inclusive care for clients. Since 2000, JFL has provided individuals, families, couples, and group therapy services, dedicated to the mission of providing outstanding counseling services. They believe that mental health is a fundamental right. Visit jflcounseling.org for additional information.
Curated by Dr. Orlando Jermaine Bego, Keep the Faith Project for African American Men, Identity, Truth, and Healing is a platform that looks at the intersectional lens that influences physical, psychological, spiritual, and emotional well-being. Whether it is a text post, a piece of art, a video, or a discussion, telling your story is the starting point of experiencing wholeness. Tag Keep Faith Project at the Keep the Faith Project so we can share your story too.
I'm Orlando Jermaine Bego, and we are back for the Black Men's Health Series, Keep the Faith. Listen, we want you to do several things. We want you to like, share, and comment on tonight's conversation. Put your questions in the comment section on Facebook and IG, and we'll make sure that our panel will get to them when they come up. We want to invite back R.C. Osborne-Williams, Pastor Jabari Douglas, and Reverend Terence Mayo for this discussion. Listen, I'm trying to figure out, my notes are all over the place. I think the discussion is rich and is needed, right? Because whenever we operate from a sense of conversation and narrative to share our stories, I believe healing takes place, right? And whether it's for the individual who hears it or the one who expresses it, it has a way of uniting us. And so there's so many things for us to talk about. But I want to make sure that we deal with the area of mental health, right? The traumatic experiences of Black men and their sexual identity. Pastor Jabari, you talked about even going back, to the transatlantic slave voyage, and how when we arrived in this country, there were certain terminologies or way to identify us for the purpose of oppression and control. And so we see from a scientific perspective how we have what's known as scientific racism, where from a psychological position, they begin to label us, like the terminology paranoid schizophrenia was designed specifically for African American men. That even during our days of protest, that the scientific community placed upon us a psychosis based upon our protest. It's called a protest psychosis, right? And so you talked about how up into the 1980s, you know, how homosexuality was a mental illness or defect. But far beyond that, as Black men, each and every day we struggle with our mental health. Now you take us being Black men and trying to make sense of sexual identity, right? Whether you're straight, whether you're gay, what queer, as Reverend Terence would say, or trans, right? Or non-binary conforming, right? There is a degree of stress that is placed upon us trying to navigate this world. Where do we find safe place to unload it?
I'll go. Okay. So part of my research is looking at how Black queer young people create spaces of safety and bravery and survival for themselves, because many of our Black institutions have failed them. One thing that is adamantly clear that for young people, they realize that the creation of these spaces is literally life or death. And in these spaces, you see trauma-informed practices being used. You see healing methodologies being used. You see community being born and birthed. You see all these magnificent things happening while they are also dealing with their own individual traumas, human development, and just the psychological oppression of being Black, right, in America. What's interesting, I also see, is how this causes this dissonance intergenerationally. And so many times you have older elders within the Black community who espouse justice, liberation, and freedom, turn around and frown on them for creating their own spaces, because they are not in the boxes that older generations like to see. And so for me, part of that is looking at why even within the Black community, my freedom, you see my freedom as a threat to your freedom.
So even during the civil rights movement, we had that take place with SNCC, right? So SNCC, and how it came up against the nonviolence movement with Dr. King, and so creating space is good. How do we create the opportunity to negotiate? I said I wasn't going to deal with this. I said I wasn't going to talk about it.
Talk about it.
I promised myself, right, that I wasn't going to say nothing. I wasn't going to bring it up. But Reverend Jabari, Pastor Jabari, you talked about the need to belong and could not find it in your community. And so you had to go outside of your religious, spiritual context to find a safe place that may still have you in isolation.
Correct. So it's a both and when you talk about how do we create the spaces. So I want to be clear that I'm also connected to the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, which is a Black inclusive network of churches. However, I'm also connected to the United Church of Christ because they have a level of resources that the Black community doesn't have. And so to enlarge my work, it takes money to do it. And so I'm connected to my people for what I need from my people, but I'm also connected to other communities because they have a level of access and resource that helps me to use my level of privilege that I have to then go out and create spaces for those that need no safe spaces, as Reverend Terence was talking about. And so part of how do we create those safe spaces is we need people on all aspects of society. We need those that are writing laws, passing laws, and then those that are on the floor and in the field that are protesting. So we need us on all levels to make holistic change. The other part that I want to add to that is how do we need more Black therapists or social workers or mental health professionals. When I think about where do we go for professional help, it took me forever to find a Black queer Christian therapist, and I only knew one because he was one of my professors. But outside of that, there was nobody that looked like me, that I could identify with me, that also had the skill set to help me and not misdiagnose me.
I'd like to add one thing, if I can. I think it's also important, especially when you're doing the work of narrative, to be clear on who we are as a people in America. And so for me, I say that because you brought up the civil rights movement. There's this misnomer that all Black people were in the streets. That is actually not true at all. It was very few Black people in the streets fighting for that. Many of the pastors, community leaders, whatever label you want to prescribe to them, said no to actually doing that fight. And so we have to be honest that in large, African Americans are very conservative, politically, ideologically, and theologically, right? And we have to be accountable for who we are and how we show up in that way. Two, that brings kind of this greater question and greater thought around if that's who we are and it's symptoms of our culture, right? And our oppression, that how do we break away from that to really get to freedom? And so I think that's also has to be a part of the conversation because conservatism is killing us, but yet we're still doing it. When you look at the onslaught of mass incarceration, right? Many of our Black leaders, both religious, ethical, and political, were saying, yes, we need more cops. Yes, we need more jails. And so we're dealing now with the ramifications of those decisions. When we look at the conversations about abolitionists, right? Abolitionism. Many of us are unwilling to have concrete conversations literally because our conservative nature says anything that does not look like what we have now is dangerous. And so I go back to, Harriet Tubman said, I could have freed more Black people if they knew they were enslaved.
I say this all the time that for the Black community, and this is a very general and broad statement, that we are very liberal in our politics, but conservative in our theology, right? And so we promote this sense of freedom and liberation, as long as it does not conflict with what we think theologically and conservatively.
Is that the reason why we do it? Because I thought part of it was that it was more fear than conservatism. I know we like to. I know right now we can say it's being conservative, but if you did something and prior to us having all of those freedom, any free man at one point was on a tree. A man who was too free for anything, free man or woman, they was on a tree. And so people became conditioned. And that's why this learned behavior that we have is that anything that fears master, we may not want to be involved in that. And so one powerful thing I think we're saying is that, and I think you said it, Reverend Terence, is that the young people today don't care about none of that. And that's where we know we have to begin to structure something around them not caring about any of that to get to where we want to get, because we've been conditioned to be scared and say, oh no, don't do that, oh don't do this, because you're gonna bring the wrath on all us. We're gonna bring that down. Oh, they're gonna destroy. It didn't matter. They were doing it anyway. So it almost was stupid to even argue to not do it because they came and did it anyway. So, I think that the younger generation, they're wild to me. They are very wild. They do anything. But it might be that generation, as they're becoming empowered and understanding, just with a little bit more knowledge about what they're doing and not getting it all from Google and YouTube. They need to get more books.
Right. So
they need to get more real books to read.
So how do we move from survival to actual thriving?
Right. So how does that look? Right. And let me use an example. My son went to a conference, 17 years old, about 2 months ago. Went to a national conference, came home. I asked him how it was. He said it was good. He began to tell me about the cohort where he was in. That it was a young man from Texas. It was a young lady from Boston. He said, and then I had a transgender male who was from Arkansas, right? Like, and so I just stopped. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, oh, well, it was a girl who's now a guy. I said, well, how do you feel about that? What you think about it? He said, oh, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Right. And that is the power that we are still beginners, and COVID did that. Gave a strong power to that, because what we were able to look at as distractions became very clear when all you could watch was media and showed us what was happening to us. Some people don't like Black Lives Matter, some people don't, all these different. But I say so strongly is that the younger generation doesn't care about any of that stuff. They don't care about being conservative. They don't care because they have to realize that you could kill me anyway.
So what is it that they care about? What is it that we should care about? Not as individuals, but collectively as a community. How do we move from this place to the next?
For me, one of the things, and I use a perfect example of the Congressman Al C. Hastings, stop holding on to power and start facilitating it for our young people. Because he died in his seat, and now everybody's in a run trying to figure out who's going to get that seat. And they all the people who used to be friends and working together for the Black community are all against each other to get one seat. And I think that we have to begin to cultivate this idea that we can go farther together than just one person getting there fast.
Here's a question in the comment. Is the fact that we don't care or they don't care, is that damaging to mental health?
Who doesn't care?
The young people?
We're talking, right. So this need.
I would challenge. I wouldn't say the young people don't care. I think the young people care a whole lot, and they demonstrate their care by putting really their lives on the line at these protests. So if anybody cares, the young people care more than anybody else, because they're the ones who are pushing a lot of the movement and a lot of the change and social change that's going on in society. I'm also very leery about saying what they think, because I'm more so of creating a platform for young people to speak for themselves and instead of trying to speak for young people, because they have the ability to say exactly what they think, why they think it, where it comes from, and what they don't agree with and what they won't go for. And they're very clear, and there is no gray area. So they're very specific. So I think I'm a leery on speaking to some of that because I think that they have the opportunity. They're saying what they mean. They preach it from the corners. We're in DC, and so during the protest, they're saying it loud. They were running it. They were the keynote speakers. They wrote their own speeches. But I think part of it is giving them the momentum and the support and the protection and using your privilege and your platform to make sure that they are safe in their environments. And so collaboration is huge. And I think that's a detriment in our communities that we don't collaborate. We need to have our organization at the head of it, or our name at the head of it, or I've got to be the leader of it. I've got to make sure my picture's on it. I've got to make sure my church's name or my organization's name or my nonprofit's name is the boldest, the blackest, the most underlined, the highlighted. And the reality of, can we just work together and make sure that the change happens and everybody gets the credit by what happens after the fact? But we've got to get past this label thing and this notoriety thing. And I've got to be in charge. We got all these chiefs and no followers, and need to figure out how are we going to save our people when, especially when we talk about mental health and Black men, when we as Black men don't realize we are triggered every time we turn on the news, or every time we go on YouTube, or every time we go on Facebook, or anytime we go on social media and we are seeing a Black man murdered. There is a triggering and there is a damaging to our psyche that sometimes we don't even realize it's happening.
All right, here's a question, and I think this is universal, right? Somebody...
Can I quickly add to that, though?
No, go ahead.
And I want to yes to everything Pastor Jabari said, and also add, we have to resource and take care of our young people.
Yes.
It's sad because most people don't understand these same young people that are putting their lives on the line for us. Most of them are homeless. Mm-hmm. Most of them are trying to figure out where their next meal is going to come from. They're not getting paid for their activism and organizing, right? Mm-hmm. They're living from house to house just to fight for us. And yet we sit in our places of power and look down and judge them. And so I want to add that because what we're seeing is this large amount of suicide, depression, and anxiety around Black young activists and organizers. And it's becoming a real serious issue because their essential needs are not being met. Yet, we have the funds to fly other people around the country in their suits on private planes and eat at Ruth's Chris just for them to come say something for 5 minutes at a conference, right? So we have to be truthful to ourselves about where we choose to put our resources and who we choose to support. And again, for me, much of that is based on respectability politics. It's based on how we see what we think leadership should look like, and also based on our inability to confront our own biases around sexuality.
All right, here's a question. Here's a question I got in the text. Why is good mental health good for sex?
I don't know. Good mental health is good for sex. I mean, it hasn't been the experience that I've had with clients. Usually their better sex is people who don't have that great of mental health because they are less inhibited on certain things that may happen. And I say that to be very clear that, why do they not leave these relationships? Why do they do certain things? It's because know this person is not good for them. And when you find it's because, this person does something sexual that they have never experienced and it's out of this world. Now, that's not saying that's positive. I'm just saying that that's some of the realization that I see in people that I deal with. But
you go into any 7-Eleven, any grocery store, any gas station, and right next to the candy bar and condoms are male enhancement pills. Is that a physical problem, or a mental health issue?
Oh, that's
Is it right? Right. You see what I'm saying? So is it that there are some issues, with the manhood physically, or are we dealing with men who are subject to great amounts of stress who are unable to perform?
See, but when we talk about male enhancement, I think that comes down to the stereotype of Black men, that we are hypersexual and Black men have large penises. And so if you're a Black man and you don't have a large penis, then in some way you feel inferior or not adequate to some extent culturally. And then when you talk about good sex, my question comes, well, that's broad. What is good sex? Because good sex for people, does this mean you have the ability to orgasm multiple times? Or is good sex an emotional connection that allows you to feel some way that you didn't feel before? And so sex for everybody, in terms of how they label it good or great, really depends on their experience. I think good mental health helps in any aspect of your life. But I think good mental health, for me, is an essence of wholeness, that you have done the work, as Ayana would say, that you've done your work, or you're doing your work. to come to a sense of openness and acceptance of who you are, even sexually. We as a people have a problem saying vagina or penis. Even as little kids, you talk about, oh, don't touch your wee-wee, don't touch your pocketbook. I'm like, what pocketbook, what wee-wee? And so we're already teaching people to be shamed of their organs, of their sexual organs. And so then how do you grow up as an adult? And then if you grow up in a religious context that is very conservative, you're then taught not to touch yourself, which is very biological, that all human beings should masturbate. It's biological, for some release. So you don't even know how to enjoy yourself. And so then how do I go from not enjoying myself to then come to some relationship or some experience with another person and expect to have good sex, when sex from my on-take has always been demonized, something that has not been talked about, and something that has looked at as been taboo. And so in most of our tables and around our kitchen, we're not talking about, so, how was your sex? Anybody go to the sex store? I know you're of age now. You're a little older now. You're starting to feel yourself. Do you have lube? Or are you using the sock? But socks hurt, so make sure you get some lube. I mean, we don't have those comfortable conversations. And so good mental health when it comes to sex starts with having good sex talks from the point that children, they say, usually turn 3. And having those conversations that are sexually appropriate for youth. We have a thing within our church, our whole lives, where we talk about sex and healthy sex conversations from a 3-year-old all the way till you transition to the next life.
Have you all aware of any studies on the demographics of men who do Viagra or Cialis, or?
I haven't personally looked up any studies.
Again,
right,
because you're asking about people being able to perform sexually in certain capacity. I think Jabari said it very clear. When you are clear about who you are and what you like and what you're attracted to, you have no problem with your sexual arousal. But what you do find is that we do live in a society where people living to a standard to fit into the pornography industry that makes an unrealistic objective for what sexuality is, and many men want to emulate pornography in a way of them living it real, not real. And I guess they should realize that man is an actor who is acting, who has a cut and stop, and you're going to get the Viagra to keep yourself erected for a long time, so you could, as the word they use, go to Pound Town. And as they do that long and longer, then I'm equivalent to a real man because I beat the actor in the pornography movie. And that's very sad, because what ends up happening, what kind of real relationship can you ever have? Because that's not real sex. Sex comes from, as I think what Jabari said it very clear, sex comes from what you feel inside of you, who you're attracted to, what you feel about yourself, and then that's where you build this emotion, because real good sex comes from having a real good connection with the other individual, not from pound town. That person you may not be satisfying the other partner, but you're satisfying the ego mindset that you did this thing from the pornography movie, and so now you feel like I'm a real man because I did that, even though your partner wasn't satisfied. So
Can I just add to that? I know Reverend Terence had talked about, but really decolonizing this whole concept and taking away this whole that black men are just so huge and big, and that you have to be 12 inches and so forth and so on, and even how we have conversations amongst men about our engagement with what we had a good experience, and even those within the same gender loving community who shame those bottom because they feel like, oh, well, that may be more feminine, and so I'm never going to be a bottom, and he must be a bottom because of how feminine he is, not realizing the most feminine guy could be the ultra top, and so we're shaming people based on how they show up and how we see them, and it's, oh, well, you got to be this, and instead of having these just generic conversations of I like what I like, and you may be a heterosexual man with your wife, and you like a finger up your butt. Or you like her to eat your behind, but we don't have those conversations and feel like, well, he must be gay, he undercover. It's always some negative connotation around sex, and we can't have healthy conversations, which comes back to human sexuality and being a man. And to me, being a man is being fully comfortable. My brother is he's heterosexual, and he comes around me and my husband, and he is fine. He is not bothered. He is completely comfortable. And then I found other brothers who come around us and they're very uncomfortable, and their comments. And so questions, are you okay? Do we need to talk? I have appointments available and we can work through this. But it's a level of comfortability of having this conversation about what you like. And because you may like something that may put you in the category of feminine, why is that so bad? Or a receiver, why is that so bad?
Jenna, we are not just out of time, we are over time, and I think that we can go on for more time. I think this is a conversation that needs to be had, whether in the barbershop or the church, that we need to not only create the space, but also demand the space, that we have these conversations so that we can begin to deconstruct this Western colonialized ideology around human sexuality as it relates to Black African-American men. I'm going to give each of you final comments to make of what's next. Where do we go to here, whether collectively or even in your own community and your work? Let's start with Rob.
Yeah, I'll start. I think one of the biggest things, I think if we listen to this conversation we had today, is really getting to a point to normalcy for ourselves and what is normal for us, and be able to break the chains of what someone else has constructed for us, and being able to deconstruct and design what we want for ourselves and for our people. I think one of the biggest issues in this whole thing is that learned behaviors, and I really run on learned behaviors because it's in the root of my work. Learned behaviors, as much as they're learned, they can be unlearned, and that's important for people to know. And just because it's something that we feel like this is what we have to do, we don't have to do. We don't have to be biased. We don't have to be gendered. We can actually say, hey, there's another way to do this, and this is the way I'm going to try to do it. So again, remember, believe in yourself and believe that you are who you want to be, and that's the only way you survive in this world.
Reverend Terence?
Yes, first and foremost, I would say make mental health, your mental health well-being a priority in your life. That's a necessity for all Black people. There are so many resources out there. Black Mental Health Matters, Black Therapists, Rob. Find a Black Black or brown therapists, clinical licensed therapists that you can work with, and it will definitely save your life. And lastly, I want to add, it is also important while we are deconstructing these ideologies, theologies, that we also leave room for the recreation of new spaces, new ways of being, and recentering ourselves on what we lost being taken from Africa. And so there is opportunities there for us to go back and fetch so many things that can help us in our health and well-being.
Pastor Jabari.
So I would just leave with this to add to all that's been said, but be kind to yourself and pay attention to how you are currently coping with your stress. Even if you have to write it down or journal about it, and also realize that it is okay if you have to take medication prescribed by a psychiatrist or a therapist to cope with your anxiety or stress. There is nothing wrong with you having to take, if you had high blood pressure, you take a high blood pressure pill. And so if you are prescribed something due to a mental health challenge, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing to be ashamed about that. Seek help and get the proper help that you need.
Well, there you have it. This is our final 3-part discussion on Black men's health. Keep the Faith Project for African American men, identity, truth, and healing. Tonight, we have dived deep into the discussion regarding sexuality, but maybe there's still some uncovering. Maybe the shovel just isn't long enough, because there's so much buried on our human sexuality as Black men that it takes more time, it takes more effort, and it's going to take more people to stand with us, more people to set aside ideology, theology, sociology, conformative, normative expressions, and begin to recenter ourselves in this point. Jesus says, I give you a new commandment, and that is that you will love one another like I love you. We want to thank all of our panelists who began this discussion on racism, to religion, and tonight on sexuality. To the sponsors of this 3-part discussion, the AARP of Washington, D.C., and the FJL Counseling and Therapeutic Services here in Washington, D.C., we thank you for your support. And to all of you who've tuned in each and every night, your comments, your thoughts have made this programming a success. Know that this is not the end, but it's simply the beginning. Make sure you join us on Facebook at the Keep the Faith Project, where we'll be curating poems and tweets and messages and pictures of what it means to operate in our own identity as African American men. This is Dr. Orlando Jermaine Bego, signing off for this 3-part discussion. Until next time, may God bless you, may the Lord keep you, and may heaven continue to smile upon you. Peace.